Hello, my name is Bhagyashree. Now I want to talk about REST standards. So whenever the different systems wants to communicate each other, then they have to use some APIs, and by using these APIs only they can able to communicate each other. So there is one web client. For example, there is one web client is there. Now this client wants to talk with other system. We can call it as maybe an app. So he wants to communicate with an app. So to communicate with this whenever a client wants to communicate with the application, he cannot directly communicate. He has to use some API to communicate with the application and over an HTTP. That means, so for example, first he wants to talk with the client wants to talk with the application and want to use the benefits of that application. So he has to pass an API. So this is one API. So it acts like a bridge between the client and application, or maybe between different systems. This API will help to communicate. It will help to make the communication using an HTTP protocol. So there will be two type of protocols. One is called HTTP and another one is HTTPS. Using this type of protocol, any client can able to call the application using this API, and he can able to use the benefits of that application. Here API is nothing but the URL. So in browser he just passes the URL which is called API. Whenever he passes this API, he can able to call this application. So to do this RESTful standards will be useful. So by following these standards only, he can able to call that application and and when we follow this type of standards, the REST standards, then only we can make our system securely and it can be accessible to others. So this is called REST standards, and it stands for representational state transfer. It also called as REST API, and it stands for representational state transfer, means from one state to another state. Maybe in application the user is in one page, maybe this is the user registration page, and there is one more page called login page. So whenever he clicks on the URL for registration, so this is the registration page, so this is registration page, and one more page is there, login page. So after making the registration, the user want to redirect it to the login page. This can be done via an API. So user clicks on registration API, so he will come to one page. Here API will present in the title bar. Here will be the API, and after making registration he will be redirected to some login page, and here also one API call will be there. This will be different, this API and this this API will not be saved together. So for every page or for every state there will be a separate API, and by using this API from one state to another state it is moving. Not only like this, maybe when we click on some URL, based on that we will redirect it to some other page which is simply called as state. So here the state is transforming, so it is representing that one by using an API. So that is why it's called representational state transfer. And whenever we build a application, whatever the logic to use that application, maybe we use so many services in that application, and to use the services we have to write the logic in a method. So every client wants to talk with that method. Here in my application there is a class, some cart application. So there will be one method. So in this way the user wants to talk with it, with this application. So when user want to talk with application, he has to, when a user want to use this method, he has to call that application first. He cannot directly call that application, and before reaching to this application or maybe the original business logic, he will first redirect it to the control page. So in any type of application, maybe web application or maybe, so whatever it may be, so any type of application, there will be controller page first. So this is a controller, and this will be the logic. The original business logic will be there here. So in this way the end user will communicate with these. So this is my controller page. He will just handle, this controller will just handle the request, and after taking that request it will pass that request to the service logic, and then it will collect the response from that logic. The response will be redirected to the client side. So this is the process that is happening whenever any client wants to use an application. So our request will be passed to the, here there will be user or client. So client is making a request. So he is making a request. First of all that request is taken by the controller, and after taking that after taking that request from the user, this controller will just pass this request to the service logic. So this is my service class. So this controller will take that one and it will pass to here. So after making some process, it will redirect the response back to the controller only. So it is giving the response. So same response is received by the user by using this controller. So here the controller only making the or handling the request, that means taking the request and passing the response back. So that's why whatever the API calls are there, those calls that we have to return here. In this way, whenever the request will come, the API call will be connected to this controller and it will be redirected to the service. So in this way we can use the benefits of that application. Means whatever we want to do, maybe we want to make a registration of that application, or we want to view the products. So all the business logic will be here. So this controller will take our response, take our request, and it will pass to here. So Because of that one, we are writing the API calls in the controller class. So I have taken one example here. So this is my controller class. So first of all, I will remove this one. So in order to say this as a controller class, it is normally a simple class, which is not, first of all, it is a normal class. Here when we want to make a controller of class, we have to mention that class with a, we have to annotate this class with a, either with controller annotation. So there are two annotations, controller, and another one is just controller. So there will be two types of controllers. So whenever we annotate a class with these two, any of these annotations, then it will become a controller class. So first of all, I'll use this one, @controller. Then explain next one, REST controller. So whenever we use a @controller annotation to a class, then it will become a controller class. And now I want to take the request from the user. So in order to take the request from the user, I have to mention an annotation. So here I am taking request from the user, and that request I am passing to the service. Nothing but I am just mapping the request to the service layer. Here this is my request, and the same request my controller class is just mapping with the service. So this is the process is happening here. In any application, the same process will be repeated. So request is taken from the user, and that request is mapped with the service to use that business logic. So in the same way, I have to take the request and map it with the another business logic. So because of that one, I am using one annotation called request mapping. So now I can able to take the request, but whenever user wants to communicate with this class, he has to come to this class. It means he has to specify an API, which is nothing but an URL. Any user cannot simply call an application. He has to know about the URL. With the URL only he can able to call that application. So same way, I am mentioning some API here. So I can pass any name here according to the application that I am building. So here I will write something called controller. Simply I will write myctrl. So I made an API. So whenever I pass an API in the browser or maybe in any testing tool, then I can directly come to this class. Now I want to test this one. Here I haven't write any method. It first directly come to this method, but it is not having any method in this one. So first I'll pass that one. So this is the Postman tool. There we can able to check our code here. That means what, after writing the application logic, we have to check that one by passing some URL here. Here itself it is saying enter URL or describe the request to postbot. So it is asking to enter some URL here. So whenever I want to pass the URL, in this way I have to pass. So I'll first write what I have to do. I have to mention some port number, then my controller. So in this way I can run that one. But here I haven't run the application. First of all, I will run the application now. Then only it will run. Otherwise, even if I hit the enter button here, if I send this one, then it will not show any output here. It is saying couldn't send request because we haven't run the application. Whenever the application is running, then only we can pass the request. So I'll run this one first. It is running and we have to check in which port it is running. So my application is running on 8080. So same port number that you have to pass here instead of 8081. And this is my API call for that class, for the my controller class. Here this HTTP is the protocol. So whenever the communication has to whenever two different systems want to communicate each other, it cannot directly communicate. So whenever communication will happen through an internet, whenever the communication is happening in internet, it will happen through this HTTP call only. So if you pass this HTTP, the protocol, then the communication will happen via an internet. And this localhost is saying in my system. That means my localhost means the system that where I build the application. So in which system that you build the application, we will say that it has a localhost. That means your computer. And then we have to mention the port number. After running the application, here we can able to see the port number. Whatever the port number it is giving, that means on that port it is running the application. Here port number will say about the on which server it is running. Server means maybe web application server or web server or application server. So by default it will take the Tomcat server, which is one of the web server. So it is starting that Tomcat on the port number 8080. Tomcat will by default will start on the 8080. So it is starting on 8080 port, the same port number that we have to take. If you want, you can change that port number also. So I have taken that one also. I have taken that port number. Then I have to mention my class name, my controller class name. So it will go here, but as of now I haven't mentioned any method, so it will throw me an error. First of all, I'll pass this one. So it is throwing some error. Why? Because here there are different types of options is there. They are saying they are all the HTTP methods. So whatever the HTTP, every HTTP method will specify some work here. That means when I want to get the request from the user, when the user wants to get the response, then he will pass the get type request. That we have to mention in our application actually. So basing on our criteria, we have to do mapping. We have to do that type of mapping using this HTTP methods. Now I am passing this get one, but in my application or in my controller class, I haven't passed or I haven't declared any method with get mapping. So that's why it is throwing an error. Even though if I use any one, it will throw me an error, because it is I am saying here go to this place and map it with the patch method, then print the result. So in this way I am saying that after going to this location, search for the patch method mapping, then print the result. So, and in my class I haven't declared any method. Even though if I declared, it will throw an error. Why? Because here I am declaring some method, something wish message. or I'll say greet. I'll return some welcome message here. Some welcome all. So here I have method now, but it is not mapping with any HTTP method. There are so many HTTP methods that whatever we are mentioning here, so get, post, patch. So basing on our criteria, we'll mention the type of mapping to our controller class method. So here whatever the method that we'll pass, it will give you an error because I declared a method. Wait a second, it will giving me 404 only. So whatever the method, if I pass, that method is not there in my class, so that's why it is showing an error. So now what I'll do some mapping with that method. So now it will not throw an error only if I use the get method in that HTTP methods. So in all these methods I'll use get now. Now if I will pass, maybe I haven't saved this one. Okay, why? Because here it will show you some message of here when I use the @controller, what it will take by default, whatever the method is returning, it will consider it as a view name, that means HTML or JSP page. And as of now I don't have any front-end related pages in my application. So whatever that I am returning, it is, even though if I am saying it is a string, it is not considered as a string value. Whatever the thing that I am returning here, @controller, when I use that annotation, it will consider this as a view page and it will search for this value. So here I am saying welcome all. So as soon as if I return this one, it will search these type of pages, some welcome all.html, comma welcome all.jsp. So it look for some view pages, that means front end pages. But in my application there are no HTML or JSP pages, so that's why it is showing an error. And here also it will mention with some proper message. So no static resource, so it is searching for that one and that resource is not present in my application, so that's why it is throwing an error. So if I use controller, then I have to use another annotation, something called response body. So as soon as I use response body, then whatever the type that I am mentioning here, only that type only will be returned, even though if it is something, if I write like this. First of all I'll run this one, then I'll change that one also. Now it is taking. Why? Because if I use controller, if I use only controller annotation, then I have to mention those methods with @response body also. If I am not mentioning, then it will by default it will consider this as a view page, and if that view page is present in your application, the same class path, then it will not throw any error, otherwise it will throw an error. If I use login here, I am thinking that login is a page, something login HTML, so here I'll write login. So I'm thinking that my application is containing one page, login.html page. So whenever controller will come to this place, then he has to return to that login HTML page. So I want to do such type of design. But if I mention @response body annotation here, even though if I am returning the login HTML, it will not consider as a HTML form. it will just return that string to the user, just like a message, just like that it is written message, wish message before. So in the same way it will return login. So here it is returning as a string message. It is not searching for login.html, because here I annotated this method with the response body. So if I remove this one, then again it will search for that one, but I don't have that login page. So this is a controller. And if I want to use the REST controller, I can use that one also. There is another way. So in order to make the class as a controller class, we can use controller and REST controller also. But if I use REST controller, then I cannot, I don't need to use this response body. Why? Because, wait a second. So REST controller is the combination of both controller and response body. We can also call this REST controller equals to controller plus response body. So even though if I don't use this response body, whatever the method I want to return, if I take the return type as string, or maybe any Java object, or maybe any primitive, so whatever type if I take here, it will not show any error. It will just return whatever the value that I have written here. So the same thing will be written back to the browser or written back to the user. So no need of using this response body again. So this is the REST controller. So compared to controller annotation, REST controller has some more advantages, because it is combination of these two. Whatever the return type that we want to mention, or whatever the return whatever the thing that we want to return to the user, we can easily return that one without any response body and all. It will not give you any, it will not search for any view pages, so we can just simply return that one. So here I will again say some welcome. Wait a second. Yeah, I forgot to save this one, then I'll again run this one. So now it is returning the welcome all. Here, after coming to this class, it is directly coming to this method. Even though if I am not specifying any API to this method, it is directly coming to this method. Why? Because as of now I only have one method in my class. In my controller class I have only one method. So because of that one, so whatever API the user is requesting, that will directly come to this method only. But what in case if I change that method? Here I am saying this get mapping, so that's why there is only one get mapping method, and it is coming to that method only to return that welcome all. But if I change that method, then again it will throw an error. Why? Because, So first of all, whenever user passes a request, user request, it will be taken by the controller. Then it is passed to the method. So if and next, whatever the method type is there, that HTTP method, it will map it with the, so if I pass patch method and if I pass post method, so based on that method type, it will search the mapping. So if request is of post, so user is passing some post method. That means in post, this postman tool, if I use HTTP method of post, then it will search for the method of post mapping. So it will search this type of method in a class. So as of now I only have get mapping, and in postman I am saying some post method. So if I pass that one, then it will throwing an error because that post mapping method is not there in my class, so that's why it is throwing an error. And if I write that one, so if I write another method, so it's some post mapping, here I will say wish, so I want to return some all the best message. So whenever it is post type mapping, then I want to return this type of method. If it is of get mapping, then I want to return this method. So it will be no problem even though if I change get and post. So now I will use get method, it is returning me welcome all. If I use post, then it will give me all the best. But if I change this mapping again, then again it will throw me an error because that type of method mapping is not there in my class. So that's why it will throw an error. And next one, if I use two methods of same type of mapping, for example something like this, there are two different methods but mapping is of same type, again it will throw an error. So now I will use patch only here, sorry post here, because it is of post typing. Then if I pass this one, I will again run this one. Here only it is throwing in compiler error before passing that one, or before running that application in postman tool, it is throwing error here only because there are two type of methods with same annotation. If I change something like this, maybe get, and here also get, so I save this one, and if I see it is not running, I will run this one again. So same again, same error it is giving. Why? Because here ambiguous error it is giving, because whenever the user wants to make a request, he has to go into one method, any of the method in the controller class. But here whatever the methods that I have written, those methods I have annotated with the same mapping, then it will confusing to which method it has to go. So if I want to solve this ambiguity error, there are three ways to solve this one. Either remove one method So this is one way, which is not a best one. I'm just saying to solve this one. I'll run this once again. Now it's running. Now I'll send a request. Okay, I change it to get, so I will change to get here also. Now it is coming. So I removed one method, so it is coming now. But if I want to use two methods and I want to differentiate those two methods, they can simply pass the API to one of the method. So here what I'll do, I'll say get. So if I again pass this one, so first of all it is coming to this class and it will check for get type mapping. In my class there is only get type mapping and another method is there with get mapping, but it is having some other API. That means it is having some other path or URL which is called get. So it will not come to this place. As of now I have only said go to my controller class. I haven't mentioned to which method it has to go. So because of that one it will come to the second method, that is all the best method. So if I pass, so same message it will give me. So if I write something called get, then it will change the message. Something welcome all message it will print. Now I got this message. So, and third way is we can use one mapping to one method and another mapping to another method. So this is one method. So this is the last way. In this way also we can solve this ambiguity error. So if I change it to post and if I run this one, and it is giving me like this. What I will do, I will remove this one. Here also I will remove this one. Now if I pass this one, so if I am saying post, then it is giving me welcome all message. If I say it is get, then it is giving me all the best. What I will do here, I will change to post mapping and get mapping. Then I can able to easily understand what from which method or from which mapping type it is coming. So if I pass this one, it is giving me get mapping as return type. If I use post method here, then it will give me post mapping. So this is the final way. And so in this way we can mention the mappings. So next one, we can pass the input to the method also. So if I want to pass the input, then I can use 4 ways. So what are those? So when I want to pass the request, at that time only I want to pass some data to that controller. So I can do that in 4 ways. One is request parameters, another one is path variable, next one is some request header and request body. So in these ways we can pass the data, or we can pass the input data to the controller. So I'll explain those one by one. So first of all, request parameters. So I want to take some parameters from the user. As soon as the client is passing the request, at that time only I want to take the parameter. So parameters will be taken in the parentheses only, right? So that's why I'll take here some request parameters. I want to take some int values. And I want to return the int value. So the values, parameter values sum I want to return. So I'll say this one. Instead of greet, I'll say sum, and here I can pass some API. Sum. So whenever the request will come to this controller class, it will come to some API. Then whatever the parameters that I have asked, that will be calculated, and it will return the sum back to the user. So now I'll write sum, and it is of post typing only. So if I send, as of now I haven't passed any request, so it will throw me an error. Now I'll pass the parameter values. So those can be passed by using this parents tab. So here I'll write something called num1, num2. So it is giving me some value here, and it is returning the value back. So if I change any parameter name, here I have said that num1 and num2. So same way that what we have mentioned here, so same way that we have to pass the values here. If I change anything, then it is throw an exception. So it is saying it is a bad request, that num1 is not present. So we have to pass the same values. So this is called request parameters. As a parameters, like in in parameters place, we can pass the values as a request to the user. So this is called request parameters. And next one is path variables. So when we want to pass the variables in URL or maybe in path, URL or path both are same. So when we want to pass the values in path or URL, then we have to use some path variable. Here we are mentioning something called sum as API. It means first of all it will come to controller class. Then if user wants to come to this sum method, then he has to pass this API also. So in this API, if I want to mention any path, then I have to use this path variables. And it also, so here what I will say, as soon as the user comes to this place, this controller page, he can able to pass a path also. So that has to be mentioned like this. I'll say something called ID. I will write it again. So here he can able to pass the path here. Here in this ID place, he can able to pass any number here. That means here I want to use this method. So here I will write, after coming to my controller, I want to say that user has to go to this page. So if I send this one, post typing only, wait a second. haven't saved this one. Again I'll pass this. So it is giving me some get nothing. Here I'll change this return type. Sorry, here I'll change the request. I'll change the response here. So whatever that ID it is taking, I want to pass that one. So if I want to do that thing, I cannot directly write this ID. Here if I want to take that path variable, then I have to mention some annotation path variable. Now I want to return that path. So whatever the path that I have passed, that will be written here. So if I run this again, here I am passing it in the parentheses, so that's what it is taking as parameter value. So I cannot take that value from the user. So in this way we can mention the path. If I want to mention multiple path variables also, I can mention. For example, after coming to my controller class, I want to first go into some other URL, something called this is wish URL. Then after going to wish, then I want to pass some data. So if I run this one now, first of all I want to go to the wish path. Then I want to go to some any specified ID path. So for example, if I pass something like this, again I have to say this one. So in this way it is giving me the path variable. So if I want to return that path variable, I have to use somewhere else. That's I forgot. So we can pass the path variables here. This will be used whenever user wants to make a registration or whenever user wants to do any orders. So basing on the user ID or basing on the order ID, that API will direct to that place. That means, for example, whenever user wants to make any orders, so there is an order page. So this is an order page, and here there is an users page, and here there is an end user. So there will be an end user, something like this. So he wants to whenever he wants to go to particular order page, So basing on the user's ID and basing on the order ID, he can redirect to his particular page. It will be possible. For example, when I'm opening any Gmail account or maybe any my application, means my shopping cart application or any e-commerce application I'm using, when I open that one, basing on my specific ID, it is opening my page. So I know I don't need to pass every time. At first time if I pass, it will save my ID and all my credential details. So whenever if I open that application, it will take my user ID from memory where it is saved, and it will give me the interface of my particular page. That means it will open uh, a page which is of having my details. So my here something called, there is a shopping cart application. So there is shopping cart application. So after registering, so if I open that application in my phone or laptop, first of all it will redirect it to that shopping cart application where my user ID will be there. So here it is the user's application. So it is the user's page. First of all, in this user page there will be some user ID. For every user it will maintain some user ID. So as soon as I open this cart application, it will give me one page which is of my user details with some my user ID. Then if I open any order page or maybe transaction page, it will redirect me to that page with some order ID. So something called order ID. So this is one specified order ID or maybe specified transaction ID of my page, which will be my particular details. So it will identify particular user, and basing on the user ID or order ID, it will redirect to that page. So in this way this path variable will be used. And next one, request body and request header. So first of all, request header. So I can take the input in the request as header also. So I will write another one, public. I will pass string only. So get header. So something request header I will take with some value. So whatever the header message I will take, that I want to pass. So in order to come to this method, I have to use any mapping here. So I will use post mapping only again, and I will mention header. So I will save this one. Now I will run this one with the API of header. So now if I write something like this, that header, then if I hit enter, then it is showing me error, because whatever that variable that I am taking from the user, something called header message, that is not there in my application. Sorry, that is not I am passing here in this Postman tool. So if I want to pass this one, so I will go to this header section, then I can enable a key value pair. So here I am taking header message, I will pass the same thing here, and here I will say something called header message. So if I pass this one, or if I send the request now, so it is giving me whatever the value it is taking as header, it is giving me that value. Now next one, last one, request body. So here now just now I have taken request header. This will be used whenever any authorizations has taken. At that time, in order to take that authorization tokens, we can able to use this request header, and this request body will be used whenever any user wants to make a registration, or maybe any transaction details he wants to pass. So at that time, if I use request body, all those details I can able to take as JSON format. Then I can able to give that data to another layers, maybe service layer or maybe DAO layer. I can able to pass by taking it as a request body. So now I will again mention some other method. So I will take that method. Get user. I have one Pojo class here in my application, so I will use that one only. So there is my request. Here I will change this one. Instead of my request, I will take user request. And here I will take, instead of taking this num1 and num2, I will take the user details, something called name, email, place. So I want to take 3 variables. That means I am taking the user request, and that user is going to pass these type of values. I am going to take those values as request body, and I want to pass this request to the another layer. I can use data here instead of writing all those values. So instead of this setters, getters and toasting method, if I use this Lombard annotation at the red data, then I can able, then it will only set the values. It will use the setters and getters and toasting method also. Then no need to write the boilerplate code again and again. Here if I kept on this data, then it is saying generates getters of all fields and use a useful toasting method. So it is giving me this type of methods. So I will save this one. Now I want to use this Pojo class here. First of all, I have to say it is a request body, and I want to take user request. Then I will return. That request also I want to pass, and I have to make a mapping. So user request. Now I will take this one also. So if I send this request, again it will throw an error because I haven't passed those values in a request body, so it is maybe I have taken some values here. First of all, I'll remove this one. So it is showing me error. So if I want to take the if I want to pass the request as request body, then I have to take the data as JSON format. So first of all, it is having 3 values: name, email and place. I'll take those values here. I think here no need of this one. Email. And then place. So that's it. If I pass this one, then it will return a string value with these values also. So it is giving me that it is returning me the request also. So here I am saying that I return the string value and with the request also. So whatever the request that I am passing here, it is taking in JSON format, and it will convert it into the string format, and it will return that value here. ToString method will be overridden, and it will give you the values also. So this is about REST standards. So that's it. Thank you.